Okay, this is Contemporary Math, Chapter 5 and Section 5A, and we're going to be talking about the fundamentals of statistics. So this section talks about how statistical studies are conducted, how samples are drawn from a population, and the population in a statistical study is the complete set of people or things being studied, and a sample is the subset of that population from which raw data are actually obtained. We talk about population parameters, and those are specific numbers of interest to researchers that describe certain characteristics of the population. And the sample statistics are numbers describing characteristics of the sample found by consolidating or summarizing the raw data collected from the sample. So, for example, you might have heard of the Nielsen ratings, and it's used to estimate the number of people watching various TV shows. So suppose the Nielsen rating tell you that a certain show was last week's most popular show with 22 million viewers. Now, obviously, Nielsen didn't go in and ask 22 million viewers what they watched on TV that week. So Nielsen ratings are actually based on data from about 5,000 homes. And what they do is, I've gotten this before, they send out like a mailing asking if you want to be part of the Nielsen rating study. And then if you agree, you just every night, every day, you mark off, you report which TV shows you watch. And then that's where they get their ratings from. A lot of advertisers pay a lot of attention to those Nielsen ratings. So in this, Nielsen is interested in the population of all Americans, and the parameters of that population are the number of people watching TV shows. The 5,000 homes participating in the study are the sample population, and the raw data is that data that's collected from that sample. And the sample statistics come from the raw data. So there are 5 basic steps in a statistical study. You can find this chart on page 296. The first step is to state the goals of the study. What is it you want to discover? 2 is to choose a representative sample from the population. 3 is to collect your raw data. 4 is to use sample statistics to infer the population parameters. And then the last step is to draw conclusions from the data that you collected. So choosing the sample might be the most important step in any statistical study. A representative sample is one in which the relevant characteristics of the sample members are generally the same as the population. Common sampling methods. A simple random is every sample of the same size has an equal chance of being selected. Systematic is using a system to choose this sample. For instance, selecting every 5th member of a population. Convenience sampling is choosing a sample because it's convenient, like I'm going to study every member of my club. And stratified. So when we're concerned about differences among the subgroups of the population, which we call the strata, you identify the subgroups, and then you take a simple random sample from each subgroup for your data. Whatever sampling method is used, it needs to be representative of the population, and you want to avoid bias, which tends to favor certain results. So there's 2 basic types of statistical studies: observational, where the researchers observe or measure characteristics, and experimental, where the researchers apply a certain treatment to some or all of the sample members and observe the effects. In an experiment, it's important for the treatment and control group to be alike in all respects except for the treatment. And you guys have probably heard about placebo. So a placebo lacks the active ingredients of the treatment. For instance, let's say you're doing a study on a new drug, and you have two groups. You have the control group that doesn't get the drug and the treatment group that does get the new drug. But the control group would get a placebo. It would look just like the new drug, but it wouldn't actually have any of the active ingredients in it. And sometimes that leads to the placebo effect. Patients improve because they believe they're receiving the treatment. So in a single blind study, the participants don't know who's part of the control or treatment group, but the experimenters do. So the control group does not know that they're not getting the treatment, that they're getting a placebo, but the experimenters do. In a double-blind study, neither the participants or the experimenters know who's in each group, but obviously observers would know. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to track the data. Retrospective statistical studies are observation studies that use data from the past in which the sample naturally divides into a group of cases who engaged in the behavior under study and a group of controls who did not. For instance, let's say you were doing a study on how marijuana use during pregnancy affects the unborn child. Well, obviously you would not take a group of people and make half of them smoke marijuana. That would be very unethical. But you could look to the past and do interviews on people, ask them, did you use marijuana use during pregnancy, yes or no? And then get your raw data from that. Those are called retrospective studies. A prospective study would be, what you want to find, so you're going to be looking for future cases where you could run those kind of interviews. And the last thing that we talk about in this section is a margin of error. And that's used to describe a confidence interval. So for instance, let's say that you were doing a study on a political election that's coming up, and one candidate you predict would get 52% of the vote. And you said that your margin of error would be 3%. So let's say a particular candidate with a 52%, what you're guessing they're going to get, that would go here, 52%. And then at this end, you would add the confidence interval. So this would be 55%. And over here, you would subtract that confidence interval. So this would be 49%. So you could say with pretty high confidence that this candidate is going to get between 49 and 55% of the vote. And that's how a margin of error is figured out. Your assignment for 5A is the quick quiz on page 304.